We are live with Altered Moments. Thank you to everyone who is joining us live. And thank you to our guest who you're about to meet. I'm Kimberly Stevens, your host, and we are live today with Altered Moments. What is an altered moment? An altered moment is simply a moment or moments in time when God appears in our lives and changes us, and we are never the same. So an altered moment is a play on the word alter, to change, and altar as in the altar of God. And an altered moment is a change that only God could make in our lives. I believe that God is alive and well in the world today, and he is still at work changing people's lives. And we need only ask for eyes to see and ears to hear. And when we ask that question, God promises to answer. Well, today we are in for a very special treat. We have, and I'm going to bring her to the stage, my very dear friend, Suzanne O'Connor. Suzanne, welcome.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
And welcome to everyone who is watching live and anyone who may join us on the live stream or on the replay later. Welcome to you as well. Suzanne is joining us from St. Louis. Mm-hmm. And a couple of things about Suzanne. First of all, we actually do the same thing. We both are insurance agents, brokers for Compass Health and Healthcare Solutions team. And we have been working together for, I don't even know how many years, 6 or 7.
All right.
And we had heard each other's names over time, but we never really had a conversation until last year when she published her book. And we were at a conference together and we sat down and had a cup of coffee, and we have been fast friends. Mm-hmm. One of the greatest blessings of my 2023 was meeting you.
Yeah. Thank you. And me, and you for me as well.
Thank you. So for everyone listening, a couple things about Suzanne. She is not only a health insurance broker in St. Louis. She is married to an amazing man, Mo, who I think you might hear a little bit about today. And she is a barrel racer. Mm-hmm. She might tell us a little bit about some of her experience on horses. And she has written an amazing book called The Timekeeper. And we're going to talk a little bit more about that book in just a couple minutes. Suzanne, what do you have to say to us today from St. Louis? Just greeting everybody.
Well, I'm happy to say that we're in a warm spot here in St. Louis today. We go back and forth day to day, but today is a nice, beautiful day from St. Louis, probably similar to Florida right now. I mean, it's balmy out there. Yeah.
Little better than when I was visiting in January, and it was minus 63, I think.
Yeah, something like that. I knew you wouldn't stay long. You'd be on the first plane out.
Yes, I was. Oh my gosh. Yes. Crazy.
Yeah.
Well, I'm going to put a picture of your book up here on the screen. And while I'm doing that, The Timekeeper, I know that you were inspired to write this book because of a dream and a poem. Mm-hmm. And why don't you tell us a little bit about your dream and your poem? And for everybody who is only listening, Suzanne's website is yourdailyrenewal.com, and her book is available on Amazon, and it's called The Timekeeper.
Okay, great. Yes, you're exactly right. It was, I guess, to set a little context of what my life was like at that time, it was pretty crazy busy. This was before health insurance, and it was when I was in the heat of running 7 different fitness franchises. And I did that for numerous years, and I was crazy busy with that. I was running around the country helping other people open their franchises, not to mention that fun barrel racing, which takes a lot of time and a lot of effort. You can see my horses behind me. And it was lots of nights of practice and weekends going barrel racing. But barrel racing and horses kind of teach you to have a little bit of grit and be tough, right? So I don't know. I look back at that time, I don't even know where I had the energy, and not to mention having my family at that time as well. So anyway, one night I was just had this very, very vivid dream, and the dream was like I had this huge party or huge event or something, and then all of a sudden everything just started crashing down. Tables were falling on the floor, food was falling on the floor, people were leaving and screaming, and it was just awful. And I woke up the next day and thought, I mean, I couldn't even imagine why I had this dream. So I was really praying about it, and the Lord inspired me with a poem. And I got to tell you, I know exactly it was from the Lord because I've never written a poem in my life. So I wrote this poem, and it was like so, it just gave me so much peace. It helped me kind of put into context what the dream was about and how it was really applying to my life now. And I just love this poem. And it's a beautiful 12-verse poem. And I had it for a while, and I shared it with a couple friends, and they go, wow, it's really good. And I go, yeah, it is. It's very comforting. It's a very, it just helps you spiritually so much. And then it seemed like a little while later, Lord was really impressing upon me to write a book about it and to kind of dig a little deeper. So for every verse of the poem, I just wrote a chapter. So it's basically a 12-verse poem. It's a 12-chapter book. Of course, at the very end, the Lord gave me a really cool planner to put with it. And so that's what I did. I published this book, and I was like, oh, all right, now what do I do? I didn't publish it. I just had it, right? I just wrote it. It's one thing to write a book. It's another thing to publish a book. And I didn't have a clue how to do that. But I took it to my pastor at church, and he said, well, could you do some small groups on it? I said, yeah, I could do that. So we did that, and it was well received. And once again, I was back to, I don't really know what to do with it. So I kind of stuck it in a drawer. Now, this was at the end now of my franchising, right? I had done that for 17 years, and I was moving out of that. And that's when I started getting into health insurance, my little part-time job that turned into a full-time job 9 years ago. But the drawer, and I never did anything with it, right? And so it took me getting this job, getting a little extra funds, getting with Coach Bert, and we brought that book out of the drawer and finally got it published.
And I got to read it last year, and when it was about a month published.
Mm-hmm.
And what struck me was that it's a very short book, but it took me a really long time to read it because your words are very profound and very deep. And I wanted to enjoy them. I wanted to spend my time with them so that I could glean what the Lord was saying to me through them.
Mm-hmm.
And I absolutely loved it. And then you have a planner at the end of your book,
mm-hmm.
and a link to that planner in your book.
Mm-hmm.
And I love that as well.
Great.
Do you want to tell us a little bit about what inspired you to do the planner?
Well, the Lord gave me the planner at the very end. He gave me the vision of it. And it was like, basically, we think about our lives always as a to-do list, like writing all those different things. But he really inspired me to think about how to design my day versus necessarily plan my day. And it was by starting with a purpose. And so if you take out what the word plan stands for, if you take PLAN, and it really, the N stands for navigate, the A stands for action, the L stands for leading, and the P to purpose. So you just navigate your actions leading to your purpose. So you got to come up with your purpose in every area of your life. From that point, then you can start, you kind of have big picture, like I say, designing what do you want your days and moments and weeks and months to look like. And then you can move into the more weekly and daily type things. But I think the biggest thing, Kimberly, is that we get so caught up in doing it our own way and feeling like we're carrying it all ourselves.
Yes, we do.
And when we don't have to, if we begin to realize that how important God is and how he's watching us and helping us and always there for us, if we will just give him the time, if we'll seek him first and lay our plans and our prayers before him and let him help us with it. And if it doesn't get done that day, it doesn't get done that day. Life is so full of interruptions sometimes. And it used to frustrate me, and I realized I'm not letting that frustrate me because it's just kind of all in his timing. When I realize that God owns it all, he owns all my time. He owns all of our money. He owns all of everything. So really our deal is just to be the good steward of it, right? And to try to make the best of it. And I think that that's what really helped me so much with it, is realizing, he really is in control. I don't have to control everything. And then the planner can just help you organize that, I guess, more than anything,
It is no coincidence that you are saying these words to me today. My day started with, I thought, a purpose, and it was immediately derailed. By 9:30, my day was off the rails this morning, and I have spent the rest of the day trying to catch up from the things that were derailed. And, it started with 2 power surges last night that affected my internet for the worst. And I wasn't even sure I'd have internet now. So thank you, Lord.
Yeah.
And
Well, somebody didn't want us to get out here and talk about it.
right. Exactly. Yeah. But it's just such a good reminder that our day, our time we spend it often making a living or trying to make a living, and we forget how to live.
Right.
And
Exactly.
living is for a purpose,
Exactly.
to accomplish what God has called us to.
Right.
And I love that your planner helps put all of that into perspective.
Yep. Great. I'm glad you use it. I use it every day. And I actually have found that I started reading my book again just a little bit every day. I know that sounds silly, but I heard Coach Burt do it. He said, I read my A to B book every day. And I'm thinking, wow, because sometimes you can get off track. It doesn't matter that you wrote the book. The principles are just applied, obviously, to me as well as anybody else. So I just find if I just kind of like, okay, let's just read a little bit, and it kind of pulls me back, you throw workaholism back where it needs to be,
Absolutely. It's easy to fall into that trap.
It is. Yeah.
Yeah. Especially in our business.
It is. Oh, gosh. Yeah. There's never a dull moment in that. That's for sure. Yeah. So anyway, so then it was like publish the book, right? And then I don't even really know how to do that. And I did it, but then now we have this other whole journey of well, how do we promote the book, and just learning how to do that. That's why you and I are having this podcast and why we do this stuff. Because we're just trying to get the message out, the message from the Lord to others. That was one of the reasons why when I talked to Joe, and I know you had survived the same thing I had with breast cancer and had written a book. And I said, hey, do you think I should try to catch up with Kimberly? He goes, absolutely. So that was wonderful that we were able to do that.
It was amazing. I can't believe we waited however many years we waited.
I know. That's nuts. But it's for a reason, whatever. The timing wasn't right? So that's what we believe about timing. It's all in the Lord's hands.
Yes. Amen. Well, give us a little context for your altered moment. Where were you? What was going on in your life at the time? And tell us a little bit about that.
When we talked about this, what would be an altered moment? I had had so many different times when I've had altered moments, but you can kind of, if you think about certain times, maybe were the hardest ones, right? The context was I've always been pretty successful in business, hard worker, successful in business. But my marriages were not always as successful, right? That was a part of my life that wasn't right. So I'm going to tell you that my altered moment really started with a broken moment. And I imagine for most people it can or does, when you're at that point of
Absolutely.
time where you're like, "Ugh," I was, my children were young. My husband was leaving me, and I was so mad at God. And I thought, wow, what good did being good and trying to do everything right, do me? Here he's left. Like somehow this was God's fault. And it wasn't, but that's what we do. Sometimes we have a way to blame that on God, like he didn't fix that or whatever. So
Yeah.
then what happens then I started living more in rebellion. I was more like going out, having fun, not worrying about stuff. I mean, I had 2 little kids, so I still had to work very hard. I had to, maintain everything of my home life, but I ended up in another relationship that wasn't good. And it took many, many years of my life away from me. So I can tell you when you're mad at God and all you're going to do is jump out of the frying pan into the fire. And so then after time with that, then came my more altered moment when I just realized, like, wow, okay, I've really made a mess of things in my life. Not so much that I had, but other people had too, were contributing to this. But I realized that I had, in my worst time, instead of turning to God, I turned away from God. Now this time I turned to God. And then I got like, okay, God, you got to be more than just up here. You got to be down in here. And I have to start living for you. And I have to start counting on you. And I have to I've always had faith. I've had faith since a little girl, but there's different levels of faith, right? And so after that other very disappointing relationship, I was beginning to seek God, and got some really good Christian counseling. And that particular pastor counselor told me, he said, why don't you make a list of what you would like your perfect husband to look like, right? And so we're going to pray. And I made my list, and we prayed, and he asked me to send me the man on the white horse into my life. Well, so for me, that was a good thing because I liked horses, right? So anyway, we prayed that prayer. And, when God answers your prayer so specifically, when you take the time to ask him specifically for things, it is an altered moment. And when I ended up going to my neighbors to ride my horse one afternoon after I got home from being out traveling on my job, and I went down there and I just got on my horse and decided to take a ride, went to my neighbors and walked into their property, and I was looking for my neighbors and walking up the road, and all of a sudden I looked into this arena up at their arena, and I saw this man, and he was sitting on a white horse, and the sun was going down behind him, and I'm like, really? Like him? Like I knew this man from a long, long time ago, but I hadn't seen him in years. And that's who it was. And he came down, and we ended up going
This
on.
story never gets old. You could tell me this story every day, and the romantic in me just loves this story.
It is, because I was like, oh my gosh. The first question he asked me was, what church do you go to? After, so we got on a trail ride and we rode, and I mean, it was like the most comfortable relationship, and it has been it's been the most blessed relationship. So when you really are searching now, I may not have thought about that. I had known him, but maybe I didn't, because of praying that and him showing up like that, and then us having that ride that was just so perfect. So I had my 2 boys. He had three girls. It took us a while, like 4 to 5 years before we decided to get married. I was ahead of time with that decision. He was a little more waiting, right? Because he hadn't gotten the vision of of the man on the white horse. But literally, I had that perfect husband list. So as I got to know him, I was checking off all the boxes, right? Do that. The only one he didn't check off was a dancer. But then one day he comes to pick me up and he comes into the family room and he spins me around and starts dancing. I go, oh, last check mark on the boxes. So anyway, but the most important thing was he was a man of God. We went to church together. We prayed together. That's what was wrong with my other ones. I wasn't seeking men that had a heart for God. And somehow you think this because that they'll eventually come around, or they might have gone to church once when they were a little kid, or I don't know, they had some background of it. But what the Bible tells us, there's only one thing it really says about getting married. It says that, dark and light have nothing to do with each other. Why would you marry an unbeliever? So knowing that someone is a believer is super important. So that's what we had to find out about each other. Not only did we give that lip service in our life, are we going to live that in our life? So we
Absolutely.
would, we went to church together. We developed a relationship with that together. And that is what gave us the confidence then to get married, and to be happily married now for 18 years. And
Nice.
one of the picture on this book has got a little turtle. Well, that turtle picture is from the thought that you need to be patient and wait. Because when I was waiting and waiting for that decision to be, for that to happen, I'm so impatient, and God just really taught me patience. But I can tell you, when you are patient and you do wait on God and you do wait on the right thing, it is wonderful. It is so well worth the wait. It wasn't like another, like marriage doomed to fail type thing. It was the right relationship. So I'm very thankful for him. And he and I both share this love of horses. We rodeoed together for many years. We don't rodeo so much anymore. We've gotten a little past that point, but we still love our horses. We love to do that, play golf. And it's fun to be married to your best friend and to have someone that you can, share your faith with. Every morning I get up, and that's my routine. I read the Bible, and then I journal, and I love it. The fact that when I get done, I can get up and I can go talk to him about that. I can talk about spiritual things with him. I can talk about the deep with him. There's just nothing that, to me, that is the most valuable part of our relationship, is being able to share God like we do. So I think that then, and I will tell you one other little altered moment. And I think what happens is, from that altered moment when I realized that I needed to not turn away from God, but turn to God. Well, when we were publishing this book, when this book came out, I had another kind of broken moment that I immediately was able to go to God versus away from him, because I was getting ready to publish the book, or starting with the whole publishing process. And it was a year ago when this all was happening. And then I got diagnosed with a routine mammogram with breast cancer. So I was like horrified, thought I didn't know, scared to death. But then I realized, because I had this rock solid relationship now with God, I could go to him. I didn't run from him. I wasn't mad at him for it. I didn't blame him for it. I just asked him for healing for it and to help me through it and to give me peace. And he did. And I was able to get through that. And he sent me other wonderful people in my life to help support me. And I'm happy to say that it was very small and operable. And, there's many different things. This whole journey was this book coming out all at the same time as going through cancer, getting the surgery, getting the radiation. So it's like the good and the bad in life just goes together, doesn't it? Sometimes it's hard. You can't
Very well said.
separate, and so I'm not going to ruin the good for the bad that's creeping in,
Absolutely.
And I believe that's what my altering was, really, really realizing that I just need, if anything, you press in and turn into God more, when that's
Yeah, I
happening.
love how you said your broken moment started your altered moment. And in the past, in brokenness, you had turned away from God.
Hmm.
But your altered moment was possible because you turned to God.
Hmm.
That is so wise and profound, and something I feel like I need to write down and journal about and really think about, because as you said, in our brokenness, our anger, we talked about this last week actually with our guest Richard Selby. Um, in our brokenness and our anger, we draw farther and farther away from God, and it's harder and harder to see that He's still working in our lives.
Hmm.
And when we're broken, that's when we really need to see Him
Hmm.
working in our lives. And something else that came to my mind when you were sharing about turning away from God and being drawn into um, unhealthy relationships.
Hmm.
I think as women, um, well, I'm only a woman, so I can't speak for both genders. However, as as women, I think we fall into that trap often because we think our worth comes from a man, from
Hmm.
a relationship, from that bond that we share with a man, when in reality, our worth, whether we're men or women, our worth comes from the Lord.
Right.
And in our brokenness, when we're seeking to get that worth from somewhere that it's not supposed to come from,
Hmm.
it it can tend to break us more and cause more pain, I think.
Hmm. It definitely can, because we're not making, you know, God has pretty much laid out the right way to live, with lots of different things. And we know what's right, we know what's wrong. And we're not seeking Him, and we're not seeking that right way all the time when we're mad at Him. It's like, ugh, I'm not, you're not going to worry about that. I'm not going to go to church. I'm going to go ahead and party. I'm going to go do all these things that a lot of times people do as a normal thing of life. But it's really, you know, having that faith and going to church, that's not something you're kind of doing when you're in the highlight of a party life. And it wasn't for me anyway. So my priorities were wrong. It's really all about priorities. So getting those priorities straight. And then when you do, and God answers those prayers, and then like I look back and I'm just so thankful, I mean, we're happily married 18 years now. We have all of our kids are married. We have 11 grandkids. Uh, you
That's
know,
awesome.
what a blessing, right? I didn't think.
It is. And it's just, and I'm sitting here and I'm bursting because I want to say how cool, as I'm hearing you tell your story, and then after reading your book and knowing about your planner and about prioritizing, your entire story is about that. It's
Hmm.
about your book. Your book is your story,
Hmm.
and it's written in such a unique and beautiful way. I don't know, I'm just kind of gushing right now because the light bulb just went on that you really are your book. And I just saw how that your entire story is unfolded in the beautiful pages that you've written.
Thank you. Well, when God shows up and inspires and writes on our heart, um, that's what really matters, to all of us, right? And that's where we're going to get our happiness and our fulfillment and our peace. Um, and we all struggle, right, with different things that come along. But there's really nothing, I guess, when your faith is strong, and you're like, if that would have happened to me with that breast cancer, I thought about that. If I wouldn't have been so grounded, I mean, that's where that daily discipline of doing that with planning
Yeah.
and thinking and praying, excuse me, comes into it. Because now all of a sudden, it's not like you're throwing up a Hail Mary,
Right.
you're grounded.
Yeah.
And that's what comes from the principles of the book, I believe. Sorry.
Yeah.
I'm getting
You have a quote that I've heard you say more than once, and it's about a mess turning into a message.
Yes. I had plenty of them.
Messes that turned into messages.
Yes.
Don't we all?
We do. Well, we help each other that way, right? We don't do it on purpose. And, somebody was telling me the other day, they go, well, I don't have a story.
Wow.
I haven't had any problems that have turned into things like that. Well, that's great. That's the ideal, right? Don't apologize for that. Just be happy and thankful,
Right.
that's where you are, that you don't have anything that you're looking back on and regretting. Um, that's an awesome thing. So that can only be something that I hope for my grandchildren, that they
Right.
don't, that, and if there's anything I can do to help them right now with, like, let's talk about these spouses that you're thinking about having, how we need to influence the next generation so that they don't have so many messes, right? But if they do, they do. It's just part of life, and the most important thing is to let them know who's the one that can really help them and influence them the most and fix their problems and help them be successful.
Mhm.
I always tell my kids, don't,
Absolutely.
whatever I hope you're always praising God and thanking Him for all the blessings, because my children are all very blessed with their jobs, with their children. We have a very blessed family, and we pray for them as well, as I know you do for yours, because some of that's the best thing we can do for our kids, right? Besides share the story, is to pray for them.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So I have my usual question at the
Okay.
end of your altered moment, and that would be if you could tell yourself in that broken moment when you were turning to relationships that may not have been good for you,
Mm-hmm.
as yourself now, what would you tell that woman back then?
Mm. Well, I guess what I would tell her would be to go back to the time of your life when you had that childlike faith.
Hmm.
Because for me, it started off that way. I remember being studying for my Sunday school lessons when I was a little girl, and just loved Jesus and loved spending time with Him.
Hmm.
And then the older we grow up, and then we have a tendency to kind of go on our way, we don't, because we didn't have, it was just, I went through all Lutheran schools and high school, but it was so much in my head at that point,
Yeah.
and I wasn't living it, and I didn't have it in my heart, and He wasn't my priority. So God is just so real. And I guess in a way I did not realize that, He was the God of my Sunday school.
Yeah.
He wasn't the God of my everyday life. And like He's my friend above all friends, and I believe that if I could have just told that person, just go back to that relationship, find God, put Him, get it from up here and put it down here and live it and breathe it and walk it and pursue God. If you're going to pursue anything, pursue Him, pursue pleasing Him. He told
Yeah.
me one time, he's like, what would you do if all you had to think about was about me and how, if, what I thought about you, instead of you worrying about what other people thought about you? And I'm like, oh, because I think that's where, like you said, as women, we're looking for different things in different places. So I think that's what I would tell myself. Go back there, find him, pursue God. Don't ever run from him ever. And he's not the one that causes heartache. You look back, you figure out you were the one that ended up on the path that caused the heartache. God didn't put me on a heartache path. The choices I was making put me there, and you can't expect to play with fire and not get burned, and then get mad at God when you get burned.
So again, I have to make this comment and just say how amazingly profoundly I see that your book is that arrow pointing us to the right path to make God a priority in our lives every day. And your planner helps to do that. And the words of your poem and the chapters that are expanded. Absolutely. It's amazing. You made your mess into a message and you're living it.
That's right. And to God be the glory, right?
Amen.
We have to purposely seek him, to honor him with our lives, and I hope that that's what the book helps others do.
Amen. Amen. So let's put your book back up.
Okay.
It's called The Timekeeper. And we can purchase it on Amazon and at yourdailyrenewal.com. Right?
There's a couple other books out there called The Timekeeper, but look for the one that has the turtle. That's awesome. The one you'll know that it's it. But if you go to Your Daily Renewal, it takes you right to a link that takes you right to Amazon where you can get it.
Perfect.
Okay.
Any final thoughts or words?
Well, I guess I want to thank you, for having me on today to share the story. I want you to know that as I read your book, I felt God speaking very deeply to me about your story and how it impressed me so much about you as a person and what you endured and what you went through, and how impactful that is to other people, how impactful it, even though I wasn't struggling with the same thing, it just makes me realize how deep your passion and love for God is as well, and that was through a very hard time in your life. And I'm very thankful that we had the opportunity to, get to know each other, to strengthen each other, to be there for each other. And we're both learning this crazy world of technology.
Yes.
If you all could have seen this 5 minutes before we went on the air.
Yes. We couldn't see Suzanne.
I was like just a black screen. Oh my gosh, it was crazy. But you know what? We figured it out.
Absolutely. Yes, we did.
Oh.
Thank you so much for being here. Thank you to everyone who joined either live or on the replay. And we will be back on Tuesday at 1 p.m. Eastern. We have a guest that Suzanne also knows, Marty Mankowski. And he's joining us to celebrate his birthday on Tuesday.
Wow.
So please tune in, everyone, to help us celebrate with him and hear his altered moment. Altered moments, right? Those divine moments when God shows up and we're never the same. And if you need an altered moment in your life and you're here today, ask God for eyes to see and ears to hear. And he promises he will show up in a way that you can see and hear. And, if you're not a reader, we talked about my book, we talked about Suzanne's book. If you're not a reader, I have put together an entire playlist of 4.5 hours of music that inspire hope in people. And you can find that playlist on my website at kimberlyjstevens.com. And you can subscribe to the playlist. It's just a link to a Spotify list that you can play anytime free of charge. And with that, does anyone else, do you have anything to say? Final word, Suzanne.
Final word. I would recommend people to get a playlist, to find some words, because I think praising God is one of the best ways we can make him important and adore him in our lives. And there is nothing that will keep you more centered and more thinking about God and relieving any worry, pressure, stress that you can possibly have by just spending time praising him.
I totally agree. Yeah. Yeah. Well, Suzanne, I can't thank you enough for being here today. Wishing you a wonderful weekend.
Mhm.
And I can't wait to see you in a couple of weeks.
I know. This will be
And
great.
yeah, thank you again to everybody who joined us. We will see you on Tuesday. Until then, have a wonderful weekend.